My full name is Jyotsna Pattabiraman, but as it's a name that's hard to say and even harder to read, most people just call me Jo. And I was one of the earliest Melton Fellows chosen from this campus. It was really strange. You heard one of the speakers talk about how young kids or college going children or whatever, young adults don't like to attend college. So I was one of them. And there was an envelope, when I got home one day, there was an envelope sitting in my house. And my mother was pretty sure that it was an envelope from the principal pulling me up for lack of attendance or something like that. So she waited very dramatically till I got home, and then she opened it, and instead of some kind of punishment, it was actually an invitation for me to interview with the Mellon Foundation. At that time, having something like the Mellon Foundation come to Bangalore to BMS, it was something unprecedented. So the institution chose its top 100 students to even apply. And then after the application, there was like a 5-stage process, after which, I was one of the 5 chosen. So that was my first, my introduction into the Mellon Foundation. And as it happens, my life has been influenced tremendously. I think my choice of career was because of my exposure to the foundation, what I did subsequently, whatever inspires me has something to do with the foundation. And whenever I'm down, like I always feel that an interaction with the foundation picks me up. So I honestly feel like it's a family. And it just so happens like it turns out that I'm one of the older members of the family. So I have younger people coming to me for advice, which is always very heartening. So all in all, it's been a tremendous experience. I wouldn't have gone where I've gone if it weren't for the foundation.
So you are in Bangalore, you're born here, you live here. What do you do for a living?
I'm an entrepreneur. I was born here. I haven't lived here a lot. After my graduation, I went to the US. I was there for the majority of my time. I worked initially as an engineer and then on the business side of lots of internet companies when they were still growing. And
So you did like college, after all.
I guess. I did like the experience of going to college. I think that, so I went to the US. I lived there. I lived in Silicon Valley. And then around 2008, we decided to come back. Well, late 2007, we decided to come back because we felt that there was a lot more happening here and we felt we could contribute a lot more. So we moved back, and I guess they couldn't survive without us in the US. The markets crashed and so forth. But we were very happy out here. And when I came here, I was able to pursue what I've always wanted to do, which is to be an entrepreneur. So I had 2 companies. One company is a movie streaming company called Movie Shuvi. The other one is a kidswear company. That one was venture funded. In general, I like to be involved with startups. And I'm going more towards entrepreneur education, and I'd like to teach at some point about how to start a company.
Right now your startups are out of Bangalore.
Yes.
What are the biggest challenges for startup companies here in India or in Bangalore? I can assume that it might be different from Delhi or Mumbai or other places.
Absolutely. I think you'll have to stop me because I can keep going. I
will.
One of the issues here is kind of the legal framework. So you have to jump through a lot of hoops before you can start a company. The second thing is because of the culture, even though you get very good employees, there's a lot of talent. People are not graduating, parents are not sending their children to college hoping that they will join a startup. So it's sometimes very hard to get parental involvement. And I think the ecosystem is still in its very early growth phase. So one needs to have a long-term perspective on this. Eventually, there will be a lot of excellent companies. We'll have a culture like, Silicon Valley. It's just going to take a little bit of time.
What is the culture of Silicon Valley?
Well, it's a culture where startups doing something on your own is actually appreciated. I think that it's the cool thing to do for you to invent something, to start something, to kind of not to conform, to be different from the others. Whereas here it's not quite the case. I think one of the hopes that parents have for their children is you'll finish your education and then join a large company. It's kind of antithetical to what's happening in the Silicon Valley.
Where do you see change in this way in India? When you say usually it's, that the parents put some kind of pressure on their children to get, education and then go into a company, as you said.
Right.
So where do you see change there?
Well, I think that the way that I'm seeing change is that a lot of well-educated young people are saying that a corporate job may not be for me. A lot of people are finding the courage to explore other things. Well, I'm not against large companies at all. I've worked for very large companies. I've had a great time there. It's just that people shouldn't think that's the default setting, right? So we in the Mellon Foundation, we have people who authors and kind of started their own businesses and so on and so forth, which I feel is more of a culture of experimentation and finding your own path, which is what I'd like to see. I think that when young people start finding the courage to say, all right, I'm not going to leave my job, but I'm going to develop my talent in something else, maybe a talent in dance, talent in music, maybe not even a talent, just an interest in filmmaking or photography, whatever the case. I think that would be a very good sign that they develop a side of themselves outside of work. And then whether that leads to being entrepreneurial or not, I can't say, but I think it leads more to being a whole person. And I see the change coming from the edges like that.
Okay. Are there any specific fields where you see more changes or less? For example, when you look into technology and you compare it with Silicon Valley, which is basically about technology.
Right.
Do you see it in other fields as well?
Well, one thing I would say in Silicon Valley, the technology is what it's best known for because that's where people make money. But there's a lot of activity in food, in the arts, in the energy, in kind of enjoying nature. All of those things, are also synonymous with living in San Francisco, in the Bay Area. And I see the same thing happening in Bangalore. I see people taking up things like terrace gardening. I see them wanting to learn to make film. I see changes happening in the arts. So all of those things I see in addition to technology. In fact, I see technology lagging. I see people embracing a change in their lifestyle, and I see a lot of innovation happening there. Bangalore has been kind of or even in India, it's a kind of a hotbed of innovation in 1,000 different ways, and I see the change coming from there as well.
Was there any specific reason that the Global Citizenship Conference is right here in Bangalore? Are there any specific movements or?
Yes, actually, from a purely mechanics point of view, we have a Global Citizenship Conference in a different part of the world every year. But in Bangalore, we find that there is a movement to get people more involved in the city, to take ownership for the city. And that itself is quite a big change because for the longest time in India, we are like, the concept was, we are the people, we are the ruled, and then it's the responsibility of the government to provide these things for us. And now again we see an innovation there where people are taking ownership and saying, well, we want to get rid of the garbage, or we want to improve the standards of living, and we want to understand how much money our politicians make. And so I think there's kind of a citizens movement which is happening for the first time in Bangalore. So I think while there isn't a deeper meaning about why the GCC is being held here, I think the timing and the resonance is very good.
Yeah, talking about this global citizenship, and now you broke it down to the city like Bangalore, but doesn't what India needs is also a village citizenship? I think
sure.
And how can this be, put up the ladder to the bigger city, to the country, to global?
Absolutely. I think when you were here at the Springboard sessions, you might have heard Gregor McClellan talking about the rights of indigenous people. I think for the longest time, not just us, but almost everywhere, we've been looking only towards moving towards cities. And I think that as we get educated and we get more connected with things which are happening in other parts of the world, we can realize that development is not always about urbanization. It can be about going back to the village. So the village for the long time has been like a hub of community. And I think that I don't know what to make of this movement towards cities. I think there's scope for both. I think that there are certain things that we kind of have to pick up from villages, and there are certain things that people living in villages can pick up from cities. So I can see that global citizenship can give us a more nuanced understanding of what it means to be developed. in that sense.
What does actually global citizenship mean to you?
To me, it means having an awareness of issues that we all have in common around the globe and taking action to solve those problems collaboratively. Here what we're doing now is at first exchanging information so that we can say, I'm doing this in my part of the world, what are you doing? And then I think that can become the basis of some collaborative action, which I see happening in a couple of years.
So we finished the first day here, actually, the Springboard sessions. What was the major thing for you, what you've heard today? If you would have to pick out one thing, what would it be?
Well, I honestly was terribly moved by what Gregor had to say. It's actually the kind of the pictures, the stories, the human side of it, and how they won against these oil companies was the most amazing thing for me. I think we've always been brought up to say, similar to what he said, that there are certain things that you tend to feel helpless in the face of great odds. If you have a very powerful enemy, one tends to be feels very helpless. But hearing the story about how these smaller communities in the Amazon won against large oil companies was very inspiring.
Actually, you are the host of the Global Citizenship Conference. What was your experience? What did you learn? How did you pick up people? And
it was a kind of a great journey for me. And I was thinking about this morning because when we first got here, when I first agreed to do the MC, I wasn't expecting to go on a journey myself. I thought I'm going to just introduce these people and be done with it. But kind of trying to correlate the different stories, trying to evolve in that sense, and then both Winthrop and Bix were very clear that they didn't think the best experience for the audience would be for me just to read something out. So I really had to push myself to learn something about these folks and introduce them in a way that they'd want to be introduced. So that was a great experience. And as a speaker also, going through this whole PowerPoint taught me something about myself. In fact, I was really struggling to put down these various aspects, and I think it kind of came together really well, just this morning, thanks to all the collaboration, all the input that I had from Micah and Winthrop and Bix. So I think I have grown as a person. I'm sorry to say it sounds like a cliche, but it really means, I really mean it, that I've kind of, definitely I'm a different person than I was, 2-3 days back when I started on this.
That's very interesting. And also it seems to me, as I arrived kind of late today, but it's still a very network-based thing here.
Yeah.
How would you describe the network here of this?
I think a couple of years ago, or maybe 3 years ago, we all started thinking about that we have a very close network of the fellows, but maybe for the amount of effort we're putting into it, we can kind of open our platform. And I happened to be on the board with Winthrop at that time, and I was, so we kind of worked together along with a whole bunch of other people working very hard on this kind of concept. And we took a conscious decision that for us to be actually impactful, we have to open the platform, we have to work with other people, we have to figure out what they are doing, and then we have to work symbiotically with them. And so I think that the network today you're seeing, I hope that through these Springboard sessions, it will become an exponentially larger network. It will become a network of networks, so to speak, and that will help us all be much more effective in whatever we're doing to have an impact on the world.
So thank you for putting all this together, and thanks for your time here.
Thank you.